So what's the commonalities in that region? Was a member of Soviet Union?
Yeah, we are all post-Soviet republics.
Hmm. Okay, okay, I see. And then let's just move on to our major topics, which is about climate change problems. Did you have time to read the questions I sent you earlier? I mean, yesterday?
Yes, yes, I have time.
Okay. And I read some documents about you, and I also searched your name on YouTube, and and I saw your interview with some other lady. And you mentioned that a lack of public understanding of climate change is a barrier. I totally agree with that, but it sounds a little bit abstract. So, could you give me some specific examples about that?
Yeah, sure. I think education in general is really not the priority of our government, and we
Hmm.
have a very big gap between education in cities and in rural areas.
Hmm.
And as far as more than 70% of our population live in rural areas, could you
Hmm.
imagine the level of education almost zero there? So we don't have materials, we don't have enough teachers. And the big problem for our countries is still that a lot of mountainous and rural areas are still not electrified at all, or they have partially electricity, which is like 2 3 hours per day, which is not enough, of course, for a good education or a good
Hmm.
quality of life. So people in rural areas and of course in very remote villages, they face energy crisis. They should survive every day. They should be in search of firewoods for cooking, for heating their households. So they don't really get an access to a good quality of life and, of course, the good education. So basically, the big part of our work as
Hmm.
environmentalists or activists, of
Hmm.
course, the environmental information, and we want
Hmm.
as many people as we can to be engaged in our activities. And when we disseminate the information, uh, for instance, why we should work on sustainable cities, why we should reduce our consumption, why we should
Hmm.
reduce waste, why it should be making a lot of changes in our real life and in rural areas as well. So people really express a lot of skepticism on that. And when we go somewhere to a very remote community to explain people why they face already like very frequent mudslides or avalanches, people think that that's not about climate change at all.
Hmm.
So the skepticism and the lack of education is a very huge problem for our country. And unfortunately, at
Hmm.
least 30, 40 years ago, it was a completely different situation. Even during the Soviet Union, we have
Hmm.
the high education and science on a very high level. But right now, everything collapsed. And if you know, since 1999, our country faced a very long civil war, which lasted
Hmm.
at least 10 years, which like sent back our country to 40 years, like, and a lot of specialists, a lot of intelligent people just moved the country during the civil war. It was the very black pages of our history.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't know much about your geology, but I think Tajikistan is like a mountainous country. There are a lot of mountains, and that means many villages are located in a high altitude. So I wonder if there is some problem like shrinking ice sheets Is there a problem related to shrinking ice sheets?
Absolutely. Yes, our country, I think the most mountainous country in the world is 93% of our country covered by mountains. So
Wow.
we have a lot of peaks that above 7,000 meter above sea level.
Wow.
So
Uh-huh.
of course, due to climate change, our country already faced with the shift of seasonality. Because during the spring and intense melting of our glaciers, during the spring, the water runoff is very strong. So this leads to destructive mud flows. And at the same time, when the hot summer, which is like, as you know, we have like subtropical climate and it's a very hot summer, and there is not enough water for irrigation our fields because of the melting of the glaciers. And we have the problems that the rapid burning of grass, which is not really good for livestock. And people in the mountain community really rely on their livestock in this region. So this shift in seasonality due to climate change, due to melting of our glaciers, is very really huge problem. And as the mountainous country, we have very rich water resources and the biggest actually storage of glaciers in the Central Asian countries. So in Tajikistan, we have the biggest glaciers in our region. And that's big questions about water management. At the same time, we have the problems that leads to transboundary conflicts with Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, because we own the same rivers and the same water reservoirs. And in the past, it was just one country, but after the Soviet Union collapsed, and the borders still a very open questions for boundary countries. So right now we have some issues with Kyrgyzstan on the north. It's connected with the water sources as well, and Kyrgyzstan with Uzbekistan, and we have issues, transboundary issues about construction the new dams and the new hydropower stations, which is quite huge. And water management is great political issues in our countries. It's especially very acute right now.
Which country is building power plants there?
Tajikistan, and right now our government builds the Rogun hydropower station, which is super huge and will cover the needs of the population. It's all about the experts as well, export the electricity to a neighboring country, lower Pakistan, Afghanistan. So that's also about economic issues because we're exporting our electricity. And actually the generation of electricity right now is almost 97% of all our electricity generated in hydropower station. So we don't have
now 96% of electricity is generated by hydropower.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So almost all the electricity generated by medium and large hydropower stations. So we don't have.
You already achieved net zero goal.
That's cool from one side, but from another side, it's quite complicated because of the climate change. So we couldn't rely just on one source of energy.
Yeah, right.
So we don't have desertification of energy power. That's the huge problem. Have you seen how quickly the river runoff changed? And so that will be a problem. The storage for dams. So it's already the problems that we're already facing right now. We couldn't rely just on one resources. And still, yes, some issues with our neighbors.
What is the major source of water?
The mountain glaciers.
Mountain glaciers.
Yeah, we had a lot of mountain rivers, and the river that actually on the river that actually a huge hydropower station located, some Murdaria and Sirdaria. That's the common for neighboring countries, rivers for
And
our neighboring countries.
and those rivers you mentioned also starts from the glaciers, right?
Yes, but actually these rivers are quite big and long, so yes, almost all our hydropower station depends on mountainous rivers. Yeah, and we are losing ice sheets very fast. So as well, it hits many mountain communities, and we see more frequent avalanches during the spring and the autumn season, which hits a lot of mountain villages, and that hits our roads and tunnels, because the transportation in our country is also quite complicated because of our landscape, So this is actually the big issue for our infrastructure and the transportation over the country.
Okay. And based on your answers, I think the local people are not quite aware of the real actual reason for that kind of natural disaster. I think they don't connect those specific disasters to a climate change issue.
Yes, that's the problem, because in many ways people think that's common for our country, and they couldn't actually see the frequency. That's yes, of course. I mean, mud flows, avalanches, and landslides were common for our country before, many years ago, but right now it became like more frequent and more destructive. So in many ways, people don't understand that this issue is global. This line and consequences are not really understandable for people in mountain communities. But that's why we work with people in remote areas, why we teach them, why we show them real examples, just they can understand this line, the reasons why, the processes happening all over the world, why this problem is global for every country, and why we're so vulnerable, because we're still agrarian country, we're still not so industrialized, we are not we still have these villages which are not electrified. In Tajikistan, we have big families, many children, and people should cook every day. People that live in high mountains should heat their household. So they need firewood. They cut down the vegetation around, which leads to deforestation and many, many issues, soil degradation, and that's the real challenge.
Yeah. Wow. It's quite, I shouldn't use this word, but it's quite, for me, it's quite interesting. I'm sorry about this expression, but I couldn't find another good word actually. Well, and also you are looking at the climate problems from the perspective of power dynamics. And I think it's quite a insightful thing. Um, so I want to talk about this more. I think we can separate this into domestic and international aspects. So first, in what sense do you feel the imbalance of power in Tajikistan? And why does it matter?
So as I mentioned before, our government is very centralized
Mm-hmm.
and almost all decisions are in one hand. And as I mentioned before, ordinary people, the big share of our population are not involved in decision making at all. So even people don't have access to information. And if you don't have electricity, you don't have internet access. If you don't internet access, you couldn't like just go and take the information you need. And the civil society is under the big pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the lack of access to education and information, and just a few organizations are still active in our country, but we almost also don't touch some really intense and acute energy issues. For instance, coal industry, which we can just touch surfacely, and in many ways we couldn't find deep information. Yeah, that's the issue, where we can just educate people or participate in some conference or raise the voices about the harm of coal industry. But we see that new plants are building, which actually powered by our coal. We have a huge storage of all types of coal in our country, very rich deposit of coal. And Chinese investments to a coal industry, and almost no solar generation. But we are a solar country. We have more than 300 sunny days per year, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, for our country, it should be the first generation source, the sun. But there is nothing, no lobby for sun energy, solar energy.
So why does government prefer coal plant to solar energy? Because, globally now solar energy is a lot cheaper than coal. So why is that?
They prefer hydropower plants.
Huh? Okay.
And
But you
I
said
think,
coal is a quite
yes,
a intense issue. So why is
totally
that?
fine, because we have very strong and effective Chinese investments. But
Ah.
solar plants have just started. In generation, we just got the first one in Pamir's area, which was financed by USAID in 2020. Yeah, during the pandemic, they just built the new one, the first one, solar station.
So
Yeah,
in your country, the core power plant is backed by Chinese money.
yes, yes, very high interest to export dirty
Wow.
coal industry to third countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and many others. But right now we're like witnessing the shifting of energy worldwide, of course, but still we have many issues between countries. European countries, they want to be leaders in transitions, in energy transition, but still we see how many issues and dependence on other countries' sources they have. And right now, as many people in the government, they are discussing the construction of new nuclear power stations, for instance, in Kazakhstan right now. And even in Uzbekistan, they are discussing the constructions of first nuclear plants. So we're seeing that the population of Central Asian countries are rising, and the old generation couldn't cover the needs of rising population. So they think about new decisions. I hope Tajikistan won't discuss the nuclear plant, as we don't have such big financing, and they are right now focused on construction on Ragun power plant. Yeah, they are still don't have enough funding to finish this huge project, this huge hydropower plant.
Okay. And have you been to COP?
This year, unfortunately, I wasn't selected, so unfortunately, I won't go.
What about COP27? Have you ever been there?
Yes, I visited COP in Sharm el Sheikh. So I was an observer from our network, Climate Action Network. That was quite interesting experience. So many panels that you could actually visit, a lot of colleagues, a lot of scientists, journalists, and of course, our main goals was to raise the voices about Central Asian region, because we are like white spot for international partners. I think all decision makers even know where Tajikistan is located or Kyrgyzstan. So the main focus of our network, of course, is to raise interest to our region, to explain our energy issues, to explain the position of civil society, to raise the issues of our potential, of solar potential, in future cooperation.
So, have you ever experienced any kind of imbalance of power between countries in international conference?
I think geopolitics, of course, rules the world, and now it's so complex and complicated issue. And for ordinary people who just want to survive every day, it's not the issue to discuss. So, of course, being a civil society activist, I see that in many ways we are at some conference, just like they were there, but but the real decisions that we will implement, there is nothing even close that you. So all these issues about global south, we will see, as we are definitely belongs to global south, of course. And Tajikistan actually emits a very small amount of greenhouse gases. So at the same time, we are so vulnerable to climate change and melting glaciers. So basically, the biggest question, also we got the international financing, but how it's distributed, that's the big question, because we are not even close to this financing. And Tajikistan, of course, in this financing system, and we actually got the climate money, but how they distribute, we are not even close to these decisions. And that's the biggest question in all countries of global south, that ordinary people, activists, and civil society are not even close to distribution of money. It's just a lot of blah 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 talking on the very high level, but we are not even there. We couldn't just like see some reports, some notes from what the leaders already decided. We were trying, of course, and the Climate Action Network is actually a huge instrument during the COP negotiation. That's why it's very important to be the part of such a network, to be close to at least to have voices at COP negotiation. But of course, a lot of decisions are still, like, seems to me very hypocritical, and distribution of money, because right now everyone talks about money, financing, not about like changing the situation or like doing something in common efforts, but just about money. But this money goes to our leaders again, not to communities themselves. That's the issue.
So, well, if there is no transparency in domestic level, then it won't be enough.
Of course. I think it's not the question just for our country. I mean, that's for many countries that belongs to Global South. We see the African countries, the Latin America countries, and we see the problems of civil society. And at the same time, we see what kind of decisions leaders of this country are making, and that's the big issues. I think these future COP negotiations will be very complicated, very complex, and because of our region, which is super intense right now, all this issues between neighboring countries, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Russia, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and such kind of controversial issues with European countries and Central Asia, a lot of conflicts and interests like faced. And right now we're already seeing that pre-COP conferences and forums and the negotiation are already complex. So we will see, of course, decisions.
It's quite tricky issue. Yeah. Who can guarantee the transparency? Because it's quite a domestic issue. So international entities cannot say, cannot order something in a specific country. So it's quite difficult to solve.
I don't think it's really so domestic issue, because I think it's the global issue. It's not really means that we have like total transparency in US or in European country. It's not 100% of transparency how they distributed the money or how they run their business, as we already know who are the transnational corporations that actually extract oil and who are already focus on their hands oil industry or gas industry. that's not just the issue of domestic problem with our government or the government of neighboring country.
Mhm.
This is like worldwide. We're living in capitalism,
Yeah.
and that's our global issue.
Okay. Okay. I think, well, I really enjoyed this conversation and I really
Me
appreciate.
too.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was a really good pleasure to talk to you. I
Mhm.
hope one day we meet and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
discuss all the issues. And you are welcome to
Uh-huh.
Tajikistan all the time.
Yeah, sure. Someday I should go there before all the glaciers melt away.
Okay.
Okay.
See you.
Okay.
We'll be
Thank
in
you.
touch.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.